Well, we are coming now to our final session in this, our first virtual WAF, and it's our keynote delivered by Jeanne Gang, who is the founder of Studio Gang, a Chicago-based firm of architects, who I first met many years ago at an Aalto conference in Aalto's hometown in Finland of Jyväskylä, where the subject was tall buildings, and Jeanne was then able to talk about her wonderful Aqua Tower project in Chicago. But I quickly realized that that only represents a small part of her very broad-based intellectual practice or sort of creative practice in architecture, which seems to me to be fundamentally around ways of understanding and relating nature to human activity. And of course, nature can move from raw geology or things like the migration of birds to advanced parametric analysis. And it also, of course, involves human history and the relics, as it were, of human history and how they can be brought back into some sort of meaningful life. So, Jeanne, welcome, and please give us your lecture.
Thank you, Jeremy. So nice to see everybody. Not see everybody, I guess. It's always fun to be together at WAF Festival. So it's kind of disappointing to not be able to be with you in person. But anyway, it's still good to see you nonetheless. I wanted to start off by saying that, Studio Gang's work, so much of it is about social connection. And as you mentioned, nature in the city with projects like the Aqua Tower, for example, where people can step out and see each other and have relationships even in a tall tower, or places like the Lincoln Park Zoo Nature Boardwalk, where it's really about bringing people in connection to each other and to the world around them. But, other projects that we have worked on, we designed the ARCUS Center for Social Justice Leadership, and that's really, such an important project for creating human connections, or even the Writers Theater, which is really like a civic space in addition to a theater. So lately we've continued that work with buildings like the solar Carve Tower on the High Line in Manhattan, which responds to the sun and views so people can see each other. We have recently completed the Mira Tower, which also has extensive balconies, but it's also a place with a diverse social economic mix within one building. And then the Beloit Powerhouse, where it's all about students coming together in this former giant coal burning power plant. Recent upcoming projects are really, we're working on a Paris Center for the University of Chicago in Paris, which is, again, it's about social interaction and connection. And as well, this California College of the Arts, a lot of these projects are like zero carbon or net carbon projects that connect people to each other and to their environment. So in a way, for me, it's very difficult to imagine a world in isolation, which is the theme of the festival this year. In fact, I want to go out and say it's probably not possible or maybe not necessary. Certainly, museums having said that, they have really changed recently. In 2020, it's certainly a different type of visit than you would have had in the past. I mean, face coverings, advanced ticket purchases, wellness checks in the museum, hand washing stations sprinkled throughout the galleries, and a more limited attendance. But I think things were already starting to change. That aside, things were starting to change before the pandemic. And I think the museum future will really look very different than what we know today. So today I thought I would do a kind of a case study of just two major museums that we have underway to talk about the ways the museum can plan for the future. When I think about museums, a lot of people hold this idea of the encyclopedic museum in mind. This idea that was born in the Enlightenment era, the idea that artifacts arranged and categorized can produce knowledge, and they are to be displayed really for the purpose of learning. And so the issue today, though, and the critique of this proposal in academic circles is really that the museum should not hold the authority to judge the artifacts. And these artifacts, of course, were collected, but sometimes even stolen through colonization. And so these are all bringing the museum into question. And on the other hand, the encyclopedic museums point to really an openness with which the visitors can compare work across geography, across time, and in a way working very much against the simplistic ideas of cultural essentialism. So viewing everything under one roof allows visitors to go beyond these reductive nationalistic ideas and insularity, and really learn things that are both familiar and unfamiliar. So today, if the museum is really considered a top-down institution, I want to talk about how a couple of these projects, just two projects that are really in the works and both of them under construction, are challenging that and how they're dealing with the issues of knowledge and education. The first project, the American Museum of Natural History, is a museum that is located in New York, right along the Central Park. And it started out just as one simple building that was located across from the park. And that was the first building in the late 1800s that was really to showcase findings in nature. Nature hunters went out and actually collected items to be displayed, because at the same time there were a lot of challenging institutions that were putting forth false information. So the idea here was to put forth true relationships of science to nature. This was their original, well, after that first building I just showed you, they created a master plan in 1902 that was a kind of very simple four courtyard plan that was meant to be completed over time. What they did immediately after putting forth this beautiful, straightforward plan was start to fill in those courtyards and build add-ons and power plants and various things that started to complicate the arrangement of knowledge, their primary goal. The thing about the AMNH today, the American Museum of Natural History, is really that the science it's not a place that just holds dusty old artifacts. A lot of the work that goes on there is done outside the museum walls. They still have archaeologists, fossil hunters. There's a lot of science going on really behind what you can actually see in the galleries, including work on genome and DNA. And we were lucky to be able to tour all of these incredible back of house spaces and science that's actually in the works happening, like in ichthyology there. And then this one place where we discovered all of the scientists from the different sectors, the different departments, were coming together around this MRI machine, which was so interesting because one of the goals of the museum was to break down these silos between the different categories of science. So many things, interesting things are happening behind the walls that you can see. For example, a scientist or a researcher who is looking at artifacts, cultural artifacts, a researcher that's looking at insects, they're using the same tool, and it's starting to merge these different pillars of science, and it's starting to merge our knowledge of how things are related, which is very exciting. So one of the things that I think will be a future museum is to really reinforce these connections between the different fields of knowledge. So here is the AMNH. The yellow dot is right where our new wing is going to be placed. So you can see here the complexity of all of the things that were built over time. What we started to do was think about knowledge and how, organizing the building is essentially like organizing knowledge. So that center part, we discovered if we could just edit a few walls on the right, we could start to create a kind of almost like a tree structure that branches out in all different directions. So people could learn different things and take their pick of what they want to know, but then somehow come back and orient themselves around this center theater and then branch out again. So it would be the first time the museum was actually connected. Currently, there's so many dead ends and just ways that you can't get around in this museum. So on the left is the existing with all of the different parts identified, and on the right is what we proposed. So in a way, we're proposing a kind of editing of the museum as opposed to just building, something brand new. I think this was a competition, and it's probably the reason why we won, because we were thinking about how to make sense of the architecture in relation to the content. So you can see, I don't know if you can see you probably can't see my pointer, but left of the center core is this atrium space in a kind of pink color. That is really this axis that we found we could make a building that's really an innie building instead of an outie building, and to connect these different branches of knowledge around the center. And at the same time, make something like 24 new connections between the existing parts of the museum so people can fluidly move around. There's an astrophysicist at the museum named Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he's an amazing man, and he coined the term Manhattan Henge. And here you can see a picture of it. Because Manhattan grid is slightly shifted, it turns out that on the it's not aligned with the solstice, event, but there's a particular event that aligns with the city grid of Manhattan, and he called it Manhattan Henge. And people started to come out and photograph when the sun is really on axis in the city. And so we wanted to, another aspect, I think, of the future museum is connecting indoors to outdoors. And through this event, we were able to conceive of a new wing, a museum. Like I said, it's an innie building. It's kind of pulled back in, but maybe aligned with this axis that already exists in the city, and create almost a structure for people to inhabit that would allow them to make this connection to the solar system, to the outside world, and to the city, and not just be an internal focus museum. This idea of a canyon, something that is formed by flow and water and wind and time, really seemed apropos for this project. And to understand what a canyon is, we basically took a road trip, went out west, and started studying just like what is that form and why is it so compelling? Why does it make you want to explore and make you want to, just dive in? So it was interesting that this particular canyon, we looked at a lot of canyons, did a lot of hiking. This particular one had a scale very similar to this space that we were creating in the museum. There's a lot of natural geography that is about flow, and this is our project. It's really about flow, moving people through, allowing them to explore and take their own path, so that the museum is no longer just dictating in a linear way what people can learn, but opening up opportunities for them. I've really, as Jeremy mentioned, I've been very interested in nature and also drawing it a lot to understand it and its rules and its kind of ruthless efficiency that it has. For this project, it's so interesting. We used so many digital tools to try to create a structure that was canyon-like, but everything really turned out very disappointing. I guess it looked like blobs, these blobs that we see everywhere. So it wasn't working. So we actually started to go back to what is flow. Chicago is freezing cold. We were doing this in Chicago at the time. We took this block of ice and started to melt it out with a hair dryer and also like a blowtorch, fun tools to have in your shop. And we started to notice a lot of different forms that were not necessarily that easy to do in our current formats of technology or current tools. So we actually ended up writing with the consultant, writing our own tools to be able to replicate some of these forms. But here you can see in sketch form the basic idea of it, that there would be these edges that can be explored. There's even a large theater, let's say you can see on the left in this early sketch, and there would just be a space that's kind of eroded out of or subtracted from a block. And then in terms of organizing the materials, this gave us a really clear structure to stratify the program in an organized way, but also working with what was already there. This final section that you see here, we're really using this structure as it is structure. It's not an added on thing. This is holding up this form, which is a kind of a cave-like, canyon-like space, is holding up all the floors that die into it. And of course, there's this challenge of how to build something like this that we started thinking about right away. Another thing just to note is that where this new entry, a completely universally accessible entry, is located, we're also connecting into a lot of the existing programs. And just at the lower edge of our site, it was some closed storage of artifacts that we couldn't really move. And so it really became an idea to somehow curate and expose those elements. Okay, here you can see this structure, this kind of iconic void, if you will, and it seems like it would be so hard to build, but we started also looking at ways of building infrastructure without formwork, and visited a lot of underground tunnels and things like that, and realized that this could be done working together, with our engineers, of course, using shotcrete, which is basically using the rebar, forming the rebar, but shooting the concrete into it. So that's an image that's what that structure looks like that all the floors are coming into. It's this porous structure that encourages exploration. Another thing that came out in this project was really just that education today it's a lifelong thing, and the museum is really supporting education from like very young kids and also their teachers and parents, but even all the way up to they grant PhDs to graduate students in science. So it's really almost like a university. It is a university. But one of the things that came out of the science is just that people learn not only from looking at exhibits and reading, but also how they talk about it with the people that they came with. So there's a social aspect to it. So really creating this museum was about creating a lot of social spaces adjacent to these gallery spaces where people can talk about what they just discovered. And then it fits into this historic fabric, but not, it's kind of complementary, but it's not replicating in any way the existing architecture, which would be hard to do because there's probably 30 different kinds of architecture represented on this building. But here you get a sense of how the light will be coming in and inviting people into the different spaces. This is an example of the shotcrete that you can see. We're going for this very rough texture, raw. This is a big mock-up of how the ovals are, and all of this, is done without formwork. It's done by shooting concrete into the formwork and then troweling it off with a big long bar in a very rough way, but to create these incredibly successful finer points. And here you can see what I showed you earlier about the buried collection core, and we're going to be revealing that and revealing it in an interesting way that people can see science going on. And like I said, the beautiful thing about these museums is really that the collections are living, because they are, some of the things that you never really know has to teach you until much later. So it's not about dusty shelves. It's really about active science going on. So here you'll be able to reveal a kind of curated version of what's behind it, and people will be able to step in and see what scientists are doing with the collections today. So there will be a vivarium, and we're working together with Ralph Applebaum on this, living butterflies, and exposing their library, which in itself is an incredible thing, with books by, sketchbooks from Darwin and other things like that. But coupling books together with live presentations, feeds from outside the museum, and collections themselves into one space. This is the library space as it will be. And again, the front of the building. So that project is underway and will be coming out of the ground in 2021, in early 2021. It will also have this rooftop that puts you on axis with Manhattan Henge once again. Okay, so the second project I just want to show is another museum project we're working on in Arkansas. It's called the Arkansas Art Center. And there's some similarities with the American Museum of Natural History in that the project really is a conglomeration, but a crazy conglomeration of buildings added on to over time. You can see all the different additions. What's interesting here is it's a museum, but it's also, I'm going to go back one. It's also a theater. It's also an art school, and they have a very special collection of drawings. But they're doing many things that I think future museums want to do. But they grew organically, and you can see here, even the addition on the far upper left, how it sprawls out. But they didn't really, the building was working against them. Many different styles conglomerated together, no clear entry, very interior, very dark, with mechanical problems. In order to start this project, again, it's almost our motto is start with what's there. And this was really a forensics test, to be sure. There were 8 individual expansions over time. These are them color-coded there. And there were 8 different structural systems as well. So nothing really lined up, and also they have different capacities. A big structural analysis was done, and it was, because we thought maybe originally we could save foundations and build up to conserve the footprint. But it turned out that really only one part of the building could be added onto a second floor. There's also this multiplicity of mechanical systems. And these things that were just so difficult for a museum to deal with, like crossing over from the loading dock from art into galleries across public spaces. So really functional problems as well. And here's what it looks like this conglomeration of different additions. And so there was this other factor of people getting lost and also the fractured art path. So our main objectives from a functional standpoint was really to clarify and to make it functional again. And it ended up that this building really separated out into 4 kind of parts. There were galleries, a school on the left, a potential circulation down the middle, and then theater on the right and administration on the upper right. So, and as we were working on this, we discovered that there was an existing, the very first building that was built in 1937 was still there, and it was underneath everything. So there was also a historic building buried in this. So the beautiful thing about this 4-part partie and a simple circulation down the middle was that we could somehow expose and reveal and repair the original building that was down there. The other issue, I think, is just that this is a building not in a park, which it should be, but a building in a parking lot. All the black part is asphalt. And so they asked us if we could somehow connect out to the park and make it, again, connecting inside to outside. This is Arkansas geology and its natural topography. It's a very interesting place that I think it's the best kept secret, in the U.S. You can go there. So could the circulation somehow edit through the building and connect into these different galleries and be an architecture of circulation, but also of connection and excitement. So we have these are just early sketches of the sprout that is sprouting out to outside the museum on both the north and the south. And here's a more refined plan as it evolved into this really an edit, I think, of this existing to make it future-proof it and make it a more enduring building. And there you see the model that kind of really shows what the spine, or this, what I call the sprout, does to bring these different disparate elements together, and at the same time create this breakout space that people need to talk about what they saw. Restaurant, a cafe, and a cultural living room at either end of the circulation. We're also navigating across a kind of sectional divide. These are just further sketches. And I can't wait to show you what this is looking like. And also, again, like making their collections somehow come alive so that people can see what's going on behind the walls. Here's our massive physical model that really was important to understand and bring all these people together. I think it's interesting to also note, Jeremy, that this project is, I think they would have there were voices that wanted to just get rid of this building altogether, but it was possible to find a way. And actually this team, I don't know if you can see this picture, but this is all the people behind this project, the architects, the landscape architects, the owners rep, everyone, they're all women. That I've never had a project like that was 100% women. That was pretty crazy. And it's amazing. So this is the sprout, and looking down the center of it, really letting light into the core of this place with the kind of these roofs that have clerestory light, and highlighting the functions that are going on right there, like the art school, for example, and giving it a present, as well as the theater space, the children's theater, new galleries that off to the left, and the cultural living room straight ahead. And then in this courtyard, revealing that 1937 building and creating space around it that you can get up close to it. And that was one of their sculptures that they really wanted to, the Henry Moore, that they really wanted to exhibit once again. So I do have like just a little walkthrough. We can go through part of it. This is just still, of course, it's in construction now, but this is just giving you a sense of what creating a space, really in focusing on the space as opposed to, and the organizing principle, as opposed to a brand new, giant exterior building. And I think this is going to give new life to an existing institution and give that space for people to have social connections. And now you can see, as we're turning around, this is the cultural living room. Of course, it will have furniture, but as you turn around, you can see you're next to and framing the original 1937 building. That is it, as after we kind of peeled back all the layers. Nice Art Deco little gem. And this part is really the one part of the building where we could put additional structure on top, and those are the additional drawing galleries on the top, and the ground floor becomes really a study center, collections, and really making this a functional museum once again. So, and then you can start to see some of the roof shapes sprouting out into the landscape as they are poured, and how this architecture really, it does a good job of leading you through and helping you discover what's in the museum and giving the visitors space to have this additional social interaction, place to discuss, a place to come together, and again, really not about isolation at all. And here are some views down the main corridor that ties all of these different programs together. And finally, that is the view of the south end of the sprout going out now into the park and connecting people and allowing the museum to go from inside to outside. So with that, Jeremy, I'm wrapping it up, and I'm excited to talk to you more about the subject or anything else you wanted to talk about.
Good. Well, I think you've excited me and an audience about this, because I think one of the remarkable things about what you're doing is to update, not just for, sort of generic 21st century, but for a COVID and post-COVID era, two concepts which don't perhaps originate in the 19th century, but were given enormous had enormous influence in the 19th century. One was the Encyclopedic Museum of Natural History, almost the museum of everything, that the whole of knowledge could be contained within a building. As a graduate student, I spent a lot of time thinking about the Natural History Museum in Oxford, quite a small museum, but it was meant to be a representation of the entire natural world. The trouble is, it was designed in the 1840s and finished in the 1850s, by which time Darwin had published The Origin of Species, and the whole model on which it was constituted was redundant. It was quite extraordinary, and I guess you're finding something like that with the American Natural History Museum too. But also then the second 19th century concept I think you're challenging in the last project in Arkansas, it's the idea of the Gesamtkunstwerk. And it's not to reject it completely, but it's to reconstitute it in an interesting way. And perhaps a connecting thread here is how you're bringing people together. As you said, this is not about isolation. It's much more about collectivity and communal activity. Is that a fair point, that you're taking these two 19th century themes, but making them much more interactive than they ever were?
Absolutely. And the thing that is necessary for doing that, not only for the visitors, but also for the staff, the scientists, the researchers, um, they need to come together now too, because they're the whole model of these silos of information that comes from the early museums is being broken down. And if you look at most of the discoveries that are happening today, it's in places where there is interdisciplinary um, research and things that aren't normally coming together, especially with data. I mean, data science is in every single scientific inquiry, and so this that is overlaid onto everything. So now so both for the visitors to become socially connected. That's one of the things that is drawing them to the museum today, um, as well as for the people that work there. And when I showed early on the MRI machine that where the scientists were coming together and using this tool, that inspired us to say, why don't we build upon this? That was a little machine in the back corridor. Why don't we build upon this and create social space for the researchers? So after they finish scanning the object, they can move out into a space and talk about what they saw, or just talk to each other. And that's, I think, the power of museums and encyclopedic museums, especially because people are coming there for all different reasons. How can you make it possible for them to, bridge divides, or learn from each other, or enjoy this more cosmopolitan idea of what a museum is, as opposed to, right now with everyone kind of closing in and these becoming more insular politically. This is a wonderful place to kind of break out of that and to expand one's horizons.
Absolutely, and to understand the world could be quite different. But it brings, I think, home a really important point about museums, often overlooked in people who visit them, which is their importance as research functions. Whether or not they're attached to a university, all serious museums have collections, archives, and they do undertake research. And I guess in Arkansas, in an arts centre, a lot of that comes from the School of Art, which is, as you were saying, part of the complex. Is there an explicit policy in the running of that centre to bring the products of the School of Art, whether it's by students or by faculty, into public presentation in the public spaces of the centre?
In fact, when we came to the project, they're really had grown organically over time, and they didn't really have an explicit mission about that. But they knew that they were popular and sustained, and they're a beloved institution. People remember taking classes of pottery there, when they were young, and they went on to be appreciative of all different arts. So there is a very foundational aspect to that school. It's not an art university. It's really a school for the public. It's for anyone can take courses there, as well as the theater is really for anyone to take courses. Mind you, the faculty that are teaching it are quite accomplished, and so we have found ways to celebrate this. It seems that so many museums are looking for this mix of, social space, educational space, performance, and this really had it all right there already. But so it's what drew me to the project, in fact. And the issue is really about how to show it, expose it, celebrate this, and create more synergies between the different programs. And so there is a place for displaying work from the school, and people can see that. People that visit to see drawings, famous drawings, will also pass by student work, and
Yeah.
they might even be inspired to take a class. So I think this combination is really powerful. It was somewhat accidental, but now I think we're starting to bring it into a cohesive mission for the Arkansas Art Center.
Absolutely, and a wonderful extension of conventional art centre activities to involve the public and allow them to do something in parallel with seeing exhibitions of work by well-known artists or famous plays or whatever. I think that's a wonderful experience. But I just want to probe this a little bit more about the sort of encyclopedic role of museums. I guess in natural history museums, that still can be sustained up to a certain point. But in art museums and art centres, it would be very difficult to say you can produce an encyclopedic collection that can be reflected spatially. I mean, in the way a conventional 19th century art museum had, it would have its prehistory, possibly non-European in the lower levels, and then you would gradually work up through the art of the Middle Ages to the Renaissance to the 18th century to the Romantic movement, and then if you were lucky into sort of early modernism, the early 20th century. Now that has completely broken down, it seems to me. And I wonder if you can say a bit more about the spatial configurations that you use and how they work with the curatorial policy in the Arkansas Center.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think this. On that note, when you're exhibiting work, the curators are thinking about things much differently, of course, today, and trying to make things more contextual, not only showing a specific type, but maybe things that other art production that was going on simultaneously, or more giving people a better picture of what they're seeing. So for that, it really needs this flexibility designed in, but also a kind of approach that will allow people to see multiple things simultaneously as opposed to serially. In our galleries at the Arkansas Art Center, we're giving some we were a bit limited because of the footprint of the building below that we're using, but a rectangular building that can also be navigated on the diagonal, so that to give flexibility in how things are displayed and give the curators more room to be inventive. And that, I think, will be ultimately give the museum a longer life and more relevance. If things can be adjusted and moved within it, I think that is, at the moment, this is the best way to address this. Just like you mentioned, Jared, complete um, complete transformation of the way that museums are thinking about showing their collections. And as well as there are major discussions going on about what are in the collections and and should they be, should they be there? Were they obtained in the best possible way? Do they belong to someone else? Those are things that are going on, discussions that are really interesting discussions in terms of collections today in art museums.
Absolutely, and of course, no easy solution to them, because in that sense, every individual object has its own history and its own provenance and possibly its own rightful location. But one of the things about this that strikes me about what you're saying is you can make a much more intriguing experience for the visitor who can begin to make their own links and their own route through a museum. I mean, one of the things that I find slightly frustrating about a lot of conventional museums is that there is a set route that you have to go through them. And I will always try and do that in reverse, or at least try and break that route, because I don't like to be told what I should be seeing in what sequence. And I think, one of the worst museums in that sense is the Louvre in Paris, where you basically have to follow a route, and then you have to fight your way through the crowds out in front of the Mona Lisa, and then you can gradually work your way through. It's much more enjoyable if you can set your own route, and indeed you can then look at the works that you want to look at.
Which is really the thought behind in the American Museum of Natural History, coming back to this branches of knowledge and allowing people to make choices, but still be able to know where they are, I think is really key. I mean, no one likes to be told what direction to go in. Look at the way that grocery stores are today with COVID, with arrows on the floor. I mean, I'm always going the opposite direction of the arrow for some reason. So it's very hard to, especially when you see something interesting, you're drawn to it. So this flow is, though we still think that there is value to some kind of organization of elements, and the critique that science brings to how things are organized is ongoing. I mean, of anyone, they are the most self-critical group about how they're organizing things to go together. But that now has to be combined with the knowledge of how people learn. One of the things I came across as in the research for these projects was just the way that humans process information. It's not very text-oriented. So when you come across a plaque in a museum which has a lot of text, your brain is just not ready to receive that kind of information, because the first thing that the human brain does is try to establish a sense of place and space. Where am I? Where am I going? And that's really directly related to architecture. So the first thing people sense and what their brain is operating on is the architecture. I love that. But so how do we make these collections be able to be absorbed and to taken into account and learn about? And so I think one of the keys there is really allowing people to break out of exhibit space, have social space, have, unprogrammed space adjacent to galleries that allow people to really process, and, so that they don't feel obliged to read those panels every minute of the time they're in there.
Yes, and I'm reminded of another museum in America, the Barnes collection in Philadelphia, where Barnes, who had made a fortune out of, I think, eye drops or something like that, put together an extraordinary and very diverse collection. And he wanted completely to reconstitute ideas about the history of art and to allow people to develop their own appreciation of art through looking at the way the hang worked. So you would have the most extraordinary things next to each other. I mean, as I remember from seeing it, you have a lot of sort of fleshy young women painted by Renoir alongside, sort of sickly bodies from 15th century devotional paintings. And it's disconcerting and jarring, but something that conventional art historian curators would find very disturbing. And I think this, in the best sense, rediscovers the idea of architecture being didactic. And I think that's really the great achievement of both these two projects, very diverse though they are, but there is an underlying coherence to what you're doing with them. So thank you very much for telling us about them. And I'm afraid we are now more or less out of time, but thank you, Jeanne, and great to see you and hear about the projects.
Thank you, Jeremy.